"You filthy old woman, are you blind?" The music stopped before the violinist even realized his bow had frozen in midair. At the gold-plated wedding gate of Dube Manor, a silver tray crashed against polished stone and crystal glasses shattered in every direction. A few drops of sparkling juice splashed across the hem of Vanessa Dube's emerald designer gown, and in that single moment, her beautiful face twisted into something ugly enough to silence an entire courtyard. In front of her stood an elderly cleaner in a plain brown uniform, one hand trembling slightly around the handle of a cleaning cloth, the other resting at her side with strange calm. She was old, quiet, unimportant, at least to everyone watching. Her shoes were worn, her scarf was faded, her back looked bent with years. And yet, she did not beg. She did not apologize. She did not even step back. Vanessa leaned closer, her voice sharp enough to cut silk. "Do you know what this dress costs? Women like you should stay near the back gate where you belong." The guests looked away, some out of discomfort, some out of cowardice, some because people who worship status always become blind when cruelty is dressed in diamonds. But what no one at that gate understood was that the woman Vanessa had just humiliated was not a cleaner. She was Regina Adeyemi, the woman newspapers called Africa's most feared matriarch. And before that wedding day was over, a family that had spent years borrowing prestige would lose everything it had built on arrogance, deception, and hunger. So if you enjoy stories of power, betrayal, hidden identity, and justice so satisfying it leaves a sting, stay with me until the end. And while you listen, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because what happened at Dube Manor that afternoon turned a wedding into a public burial of pride. In Lagos, Abuja, Accra, Nairobi, Johannesburg, and every city where money tries to imitate legacy, one name still opened doors before cars even stopped moving: Regina Adeyemi. She did not own the loudest company on the continent, but she owned the kind of power that made louder people nervous. She was the founder of the Adeyemi Group, a business empire stretched across ports, logistics, luxury real estate, energy, agriculture, banking, and media. Politicians smiled wider around her. Executives rehearsed before meeting her. Men who liked hearing themselves talk suddenly became careful when she entered a room. Her husband, Samuel Adeyemi, had built wealth. Regina had turned that wealth into structure, discipline, and fearsome respect. When he died 12 years earlier, many investors assumed the empire would fracture under pressure. Instead, it grew sharper, cleaner, more profitable. She closed rotten divisions, opened schools through the family foundation, funded maternal hospitals in rural areas, and quietly ruined a number of dishonest men who had mistaken widowhood for weakness. But for all the order she brought to business, there was one place where her control had started to slip. Her only son, Malik Adeyemi. Malik was 31, polished, handsome, and dangerously easy to love. He had his father's warmth and his mother's posture, but not yet her suspicion. He remembered drivers' names. He tipped waiters without performance. He laughed with his whole face. He believed sincerity in himself would naturally attract sincerity in others. That softness made people feel safe around him. It also made him easy to study. And Vanessa Dube had studied him very well. She had not entered elite circles by accident. Vanessa moved like a woman who had spent years learning how rich rooms worked. She knew when to lower her eyes and when to hold them. She knew how to laugh just enough. She knew how to speak about charity without sounding poor, about fashion without sounding shallow, about ambition without sounding hungry. Around old money, she looked elegant. Around cameras, she looked compassionate. Around Malik, She looked inevitable. Within months, people in society had already started speaking as if the wedding had happened. Vanessa and Malik, the perfect match. The beautiful bride. The future queen of the Adeyemi Empire. Though there was no crown, only boardrooms, assets, and the kind of inherited influence that could decide who rose and who disappeared. Only Regina was not convinced. At a fundraiser for pediatric clinics, she watched Vanessa embrace donors with warmth, then turn cold the second photographers shifted away. At a private dinner, she noticed Vanessa thanking the chairman, complimenting his wife, and ignoring the woman refilling water beside her as if service workers were furniture. At a gallery launch, she heard Vanessa whisper to a friend, "People who smell like struggle should not be allowed near vintage silk." The friend laughed. Regina did not. When she first raised her concern with Malik, it happened in the glass conservatory at the family residence just after sunset. Rain pressed softly against the ceiling while city lights flickered below the hill. Malik sighed before she even finished speaking. "Mother, you don't know her the way I do." Regina folded her hands. "That is precisely what worries me." He shook his head. "You judge too quickly." "No," Regina said quietly. "I judge patterns, and patterns become consequences." He smiled with the patience of a son who thought love had made him wiser than history. "Vanessa grew up different from us. Maybe sometimes she overcompensates. That does not make her cruel." Regina held his gaze. Cruelty often begins as overcompensation in people who worship position. He turned away, wounded. "You think every woman near me wants power?" "No," she answered. "Only the ones who learn to dress greed like grace." That conversation left a crack between them. Not a loud one. Not yet. But the messages became shorter. The dinners became formal. And somewhere in that distance, Vanessa grew more confident. Then the invitation arrived. It came on heavy cream paper edged with gold, embossed with a crest the Dube family had invented so recently that even the ink looked eager. Mrs. Selina Dube, Vanessa's mother, requested the honor of hosting Regina Adeyemi and her son at Dube Manor for a private pre-wedding family blessing and press-free luncheon before the official ceremony the following week. Malik was thrilled. "You see," he said with relief, "they want to respect tradition." Regina read the invitation twice. No, they wanted theater. That evening, she sat alone in her late husband's library while the house lights dimmed one wing at a time. A cup of tea cooled, untouched, beside her. She thought of Malik's blind faith. She thought of Vanessa's perfect smile. She thought of the thousands of people whose livelihoods were protected by the decisions made inside the Adeyemi structure. An heir could afford one bad romance. An empire could not afford one strategic parasite. By midnight, Regina had made her decision. She would not attend Dube Manor as Regina Adeyemi. She would arrive as someone Vanessa would reveal her true face to. The next morning, before the official convoy prepared for the afternoon visit, Regina opened an old cedar wardrobe in her private dressing suite. Inside were garments she had once used years before during anonymous inspections of schools, shelters, and remote clinics funded by the family foundation. A plain brown cleaner's uniform, a faded head wrap, flat black shoes. No pearls, no diamond watch, no perfume. Her chief steward, Mr. Tunde Bako, stood in respectful silence as she removed her rings one by one and placed them in a velvet case. "Madam," he said carefully, "if they behave badly, should we intervene immediately?" Regina adjusted the cuff of the worn uniform and looked into the mirror. The billionaire vanished. In her place stood a woman no one wealthy would notice unless forced to. That, Regina said softly, depends on how much truth they choose to reveal before fear arrives. Dube Manor sat outside the city, on land that had once belonged to a cocoa merchant before being sold during a debt crisis. From a distance, it looked magnificent. Cream walls, imported stone, tall iron gates, white floral arches, reflecting pools, luxury cars gliding through gravel like swans across expensive lies. But the closer one looked, the more desperate the beauty became. The columns were too new. The family crest above the entrance was recently mounted. The antique lanterns had never faced weather. The place did not feel inherited. It felt assembled, like someone had spent a fortune trying to force old prestige into fresh cement. At the service gate, vans unloaded orchids, crystal centerpieces, pastry towers, imported fruit, custom linens, scented candles, and enough rented silverware to convince strangers that the Dube family had been elegant for generations. They had not. They had simply become wealthy enough to stage elegance under pressure. Regina arrived in the back of a supply vehicle with 3 temporary workers hired for the event. Nobody checked her face carefully. Nobody asked the right questions. A sharp-nosed supervisor took one glance at her clothes and shoved a folded cleaning schedule into her hand. "You are the extra cleaner from the agency?" "Yes," Regina replied, lowering her eyes. "Then stop standing there. Madame Selina wants perfection today, and perfection never waits for poor people." Inside the service corridors, the illusion of grace ended immediately. Young women in pressed uniforms were being shouted at for carrying the wrong trays. A florist was insulted because the lilies looked too local. A kitchen assistant was nearly reduced to tears because a sauce was described as village tasting. One driver was threatened with dismissal for parking half a foot beyond a marble line. Fear moved through that house faster than air. And at the center of it stood Selina Dube. Vanessa's mother was dressed in deep wine silk with gold cuffs stacked along both wrists. She moved from room to room with the authority of a woman intoxicated by finally being obeyed. Every sentence she spoke seemed to contain either contempt or appetite. "These roses are not full enough. Hide the staff entrance from any camera angle. Why are those workers still visible from the garden? If the Adeyemis see disorder, they will think we are ordinary." Ordinary. It was always people terrified of being ordinary who treated other human beings like insects. Later, while polishing a mirror in the upstairs hall, Regina heard laughter behind a half-open door. Selina was inside the sitting room with 2 friends and a wedding planner. "Once Vanessa marries Malik," Selina said, "this city will have no choice but to remember who ignored us." One friend giggled. "And Regina Adeyemi?" Selina's voice lowered with poison. "Old women with old power always think they cannot be replaced." The room laughed. Regina kept wiping the mirror. In the bridal suite, Vanessa was preparing for the luncheon as if she were preparing for conquest. Emerald fabric clung to her frame like something cut for attention. Her earrings flashed when she turned. 2 stylists worked around her while a makeup artist adjusted light against her cheekbones. Regina entered with a tray of tea and saw what most men in love never do: practice. Vanessa was studying expressions in the mirror: joy, softness, concern, admiration, humility. She tested them one by one, rejecting each until she found the exact version that made innocence look expensive. Then she noticed the old cleaner in the room. "Set the tray down," she said without looking fully at her. "And do not drip on the carpet. This rug costs more than your entire life." Regina placed the tea quietly on the side table. There was no anger in her face, only observation. By noon, the manor had tightened with anticipation. Musicians were placed near the front courtyard. Floral perfume floated in waves. Influential guests began to arrive early, all eager to witness the joining of a family with money to a family with power. Malik was expected soon. Regina had been instructed to remain near the main gate and help keep the entry path spotless before the official family welcome. The sun had turned the stone warm. Conversations shimmered. Cameras were absent by request, but phones remained hidden in enough hands to make any humiliation permanent. Then it happened. A child running past the fountain brushed a server. The server stumbled. Regina reached out instinctively to steady the tray, and a few drops of sparkling juice flicked onto the lower edge of Vanessa's gown just as she swept toward the gate to receive Malik. Vanessa froze. The world around her should have kept moving. It did not. She turned slowly and saw only what pride always notices first. Not intent, not accident, not age, not humanity. Only status. "You filthy old woman! Are you blind?" Crystal shattered across the stone. Vanessa had slapped the tray from Regina's hands. Several guests gasped. One violinist stopped. A young maid near the columns took a step forward and then stopped herself. The old cleaner's scarf shifted slightly from the force, but Regina straightened it with calm fingers. Vanessa moved closer, her face bright with cruelty. "You people should not be allowed near important events. Look at what you did. If I see you anywhere near the front again, I will have you thrown out before sunset." Regina lifted her eyes. There was something in them Vanessa did not understand. Not fear, not humiliation. Distance. The kind that belongs to someone already measuring your fall. But Vanessa mistook it for helplessness. "Clean this up," she snapped, "and remember your place." She turned away in perfume and emerald silk just as the sound of engines rolled through the gate. Malik had arrived. The transformation was immediate. The same woman who had just publicly degraded an old cleaner now glided forward with softness in every limb. Her smile warmed, her voice sweetened. She took Malik's hands like tenderness itself had entered the courtyard. She even thanked the staff loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, as if kindness could be switched on like decorative lighting. Malik looked at her the way trusting men often look at beautiful lies. From the edge of the courtyard, Regina watched her son fail to see the truth, standing only feet away from him. That cut deeper than Vanessa's words. Lunch followed in the West Dining Hall, where polished wood, imported artwork, and expensive table settings attempted to create heritage in a room too new to have any memory. Regina moved in silence with the service staff, pouring juice, refilling water, adjusting plates, and listening. Malik laughed often. Selena praised his humility. Vanessa leaned toward him with soft eyes and well-timed concern. To a casual observer, it looked like harmony. But performances always relax when actors think the audience is friendly. After the meal, the men drifted toward the terrace overlooking the lake, while the women withdrew to a private lounge near the eastern corridor. Malik lingered just outside to take a phone call. Regina, carrying a tray of used glasses, paused when she heard Selena's voice sharpen behind the partly closed door. "The boy is easier than I expected," Selena said. Vanessa laughed softly. "Because he wants to believe love made him special. Men like that are grateful for worship, even when it is strategic." "And after the wedding?" one of the friends asked. Vanessa did not hesitate. "After the wedding, Malik can keep the spotlight. I want the structure, board access, foundation influence, Signature pathways. The older advisors are loyal to Regina, but loyalty changes when leadership changes. Once I am legally family, I will modernize everything. Selina chuckled. And Regina Adeyemi? A pause. Then Vanessa's voice became smooth and cold. Publicly, we honor her. Privately, we reduce her. Give her speeches, give her ceremonies, move actual control elsewhere. Old power never leaves happily, so you make it decorative. The women laughed. Another voice asked, and if she resists? Vanessa answered in a tone that belonged to people who mistake ambition for intelligence. Then she learns what every aging lion learns. The jungle belongs to whoever controls the next generation. Regina's grip tightened around the tray. At that exact moment, Malik stepped near the doorway, hearing only the tail end of laughter and one harmless sentence about refreshing leadership. Vanessa pivoted so quickly, even guilt seemed elegant on her. She touched his arm, smiled, and redirected the room with such practiced grace that he suspected nothing. Regina lowered her eyes again. Desire, she thought, is often the most expensive blindness. The afternoon moved forward under a false calm. Tea was served in the courtyard. Guests circulated. Musicians resumed. Vanessa glowed beneath admiration. Selina moved through the manor like victory had already signed its name at the bottom of every document she had ever envied. Then the front gates opened again. This time, the sound was different. Not festive, controlled. 3 black armored vehicles swept onto the drive, followed by 2 executive sedans bearing the discreet crest of the Adeyemi private office. Every head turned. Selina smiled so fast it almost looked like panic. "To honor us properly," she whispered. Vanessa adjusted her earrings and lifted her chin. She slipped her hand possessively around Malik's arm. The first vehicle stopped, then the second, then the third. Doors opened in practiced sequence. Out stepped Mr. Tunde Bako, Regina's chief steward, followed by the family legal counsel, 2 senior company directors, the head of foundation operations, and private security dressed so discreetly that only the foolish mistook them for decoration. Conversation died. Selina stepped forward with a wide smile that belonged to women still believing the universe had arrived to applaud them. "Mr. Bako, what a pleasure. Please tell Madam Regina." He walked past her. Not rudely, worse, as though she were irrelevant. His measured steps crossed the courtyard, past the floral arch, past the frozen musicians, past Vanessa, past Malik, until he stopped before the old cleaner, standing beside a marble pillar with a folded cloth in her hand. Then he bowed, deeply. "Madam." The courtyard lost its breath. For one suspended heartbeat, nobody moved. Then the old cleaner removed her faded head wrap. Silver-black hair settled around a composed face the continent knew from magazine covers, foundation reports, board announcements, and whispered political calculations. She loosened the outer layer of the brown uniform, and beneath it appeared a sharply tailored dark dress, worn not for display, but for command. But the true transformation was not clothing. It was posture. The cleaner disappeared. Authority remained. Regina Adeyemi stood before them. A glass slipped from someone's hand and exploded against stone. One of the maids began to cry. A driver lowered himself to one knee without thinking. Selina stumbled backward and caught the edge of a chair. Vanessa's face drained so quickly the makeup artist who had painted it that morning would not have recognized her. Malik stared at his mother as though the ground under him had shifted shape. Regina touched the side of her sleeve where sparkling juice had dried. When she spoke, her voice was calm enough to terrify. "Your daughter performs confidence beautifully," she said to Selina. "But she performs humanity very poorly." No one answered. No one could. Selina rushed forward, shaking. "Madam Regina, this is a misunderstanding. We did not know." "There is no misunderstanding," Regina said. She turned slightly toward Mr. Bacon. "Bring the staff." Within minutes, they stood lined across the courtyard. Servers, cleaners, florists, drivers, kitchen assistants, the event supervisor, the young maid who had nearly stepped forward earlier, and the violinist who had watched everything with horror. Regina looked at them one by one. "Speak truthfully. You answer to me now." The first witness described the broken tray and Vanessa's insults. The second described how staff had been threatened all morning. A florist repeated Selina's comment about poor relatives being hidden from view in family photographs. A kitchen assistant revealed that leftover food had been marked for disposal rather than donation, because Selina believed charity after luxury events made wealthy people look desperate. The young maid, tears running openly now, repeated the conversation she had overheard about reducing Regina to decoration and taking control of the foundation through marriage. Each sentence landed like stone in water. Wider, colder, impossible to gather back. Vanessa tried to interrupt. "They are lying because they want money." Regina turned her gaze to her. "When poor people lie for money, they usually look frightened. These people look relieved." Vanessa opened her mouth. Nothing useful came out. Selina began pleading in a stream of titles, apologies, and excuses. The more she spoke, the more naked her desperation became. One of her friends quietly stepped backward toward the side exit. Another pretended to check her phone. Social courage always dies first around scandal. Then Malik stepped forward. He looked at his mother, then at Vanessa, then at the staff, then at the floor. For the first time that day, love lost its argument. "Mother," he said hoarsely, "I did not know." Regina met his eyes. "That," she replied, "is not the comfort you think it is." He lowered his head. The courtyard, once decorated for celebration, now felt like a courtroom built by fate and furnished by vanity. The orchids looked wasteful. The music stands looked ridiculous. Even the fountain seemed embarrassed to still be running. At last, Regina spoke again. "Let this be settled clearly." Her voice did not rise, yet every person present heard it with painful clarity. "The wedding between Malik Adeyemi and Vanessa Dube ends now." Vanessa made a sound somewhere between disbelief and panic. "Please!" Regina lifted one hand and silence returned instantly. "Malik Adeyemi," she continued, "will be removed for a period from all strategic votes related to the group foundation, trust structures, and family succession planning until he proves that affection has not made him unfit for judgment." Malik bowed his head lower. Regina then turned to Selina. Dube Manor was renovated through layered loans facilitated by institutions that maintained confidence because of your anticipated association with my family. Those files will be reviewed before sunset. Every obligation will now be enforced without assumption of future alliance. Selina nearly collapsed. "And before tonight ends," Regina said, "every circle that praised refinement in this house will know exactly what conduct refinement concealed." In their world, scandal traveled faster than debt and cut deeper than legal letters. Vanessa dropped to her knees beside her mother, crying now with the violent desperation of someone who has just realized beauty cannot negotiate with consequences forever. Mascara darkened her face. Her perfect voice cracked. "I love him," she said, reaching toward Malik. "I was nervous. I made mistakes. I said foolish things." Regina did not even look at her. "Tears that arrive after witnesses are not repentance," she said. "They are strategy with ruined timing." Malik stepped back from Vanessa, as if he had finally smelled smoke inside a room he thought was safe. When he spoke, his voice sounded stripped. "I failed you." Regina's expression softened, but only slightly. "A naive heart can be corrected," she said. "A cruel heart usually protects itself until it rots." Then she turned and walked toward the waiting vehicles. No dramatic pause, no final argument. Real power rarely needs a second performance. Her people followed with silent precision. Malik followed them more slowly, like a man attending the burial of an illusion he had personally defended. The consequences began before evening prayer. By nightfall, invitations were quietly withdrawn from the Dubes for 3 upcoming high society events. By the next morning, 2 luxury suppliers requested payment in advance for outstanding balances. A private bank that had been smiling for months suddenly became formal. Friends who once called Selena 3 times a day developed excellent reasons to remain unavailable. Within a week, the city knew. Not through screaming headlines, through worse. Carefully worded whispers from reliable mouths. At charity luncheons, in executive lounges, at private club terraces, in salon chairs, on golf courses, in prayer meetings, and over expensive dinners where reputation was served as a side dish, people repeated the story. Vanessa Dube humiliated an old cleaner at her own pre-wedding event. The cleaner turned out to be Regina Adeyemi. The wedding was canceled on the spot. The family's debts were under review. The foundation takeover plan had been overheard. By the end of the month, Dube Manor had become less a home than a monument to miscalculation. Creditors arrived with sharpened language. Contractors who had extended courtesy on the expectation of future Adeyemi favor became exact. The event company reclaimed decorative assets. One imported vehicle disappeared from the garage under a financing dispute. A boutique that had once begged Vanessa to wear its gowns requested settlement of an account her mother had assumed would be forgotten after marriage. Nothing humiliates counterfeit prestige like paperwork. 3 months later, the debt review was complete. Dube Manor, with its fresh columns and borrowed grandeur, was seized and sold through a discreet but devastating process. The chandeliers were catalogued. The art was evaluated and found less valuable than claimed. The marble fountain was dismantled. Selena left the property through the same service gate she had spent years trying to hide from guests. As for Vanessa, she did not disappear. That would have been kinder. She remained just visible enough to become a cautionary tale. Her name survived in whispers. Her photographs remained online. Her face still carried beauty. But the room changed when she entered it. People smiled less, trusted less, invited less. Because once a person has publicly revealed contempt for those beneath them, everyone above them begins to wonder what they would do if given actual power. Malik's punishment was quieter and more useful. For 1 full year, Regina removed him from ceremonial ease and placed him where consequences were visible. He reviewed clinic budgets in towns he had only ever flown over. He spent long, wet mornings in agricultural cooperatives, listening to widows explain why delayed transport could wipe out a season's profit. He sat in scholarship offices where one missing signature could cost a brilliant student a future. He visited warehouse staff at dawn, school kitchens at noon, and roadside health centers by evening. He met drivers whose children were studying medicine because of foundation grants. He met cleaners who worked double shifts so younger brothers could finish secondary school. He met mothers who knew Regina's name not because she was rich, but because a hospital wing bearing the foundation's funding had saved their daughters. Little by little, charm left him. Character entered. He apologized less with speeches and more with attention. He learned not just the language of leadership, but the weight of neglect. By the time a year had passed, even the way he walked had changed. Less like a man expecting admiration, more like a man trying to become worthy of trust. And Regina, being exactly who she had always been, did not stop at punishment. She restored balance. The young maid who had cried at the courtyard and later told the truth despite trembling was named Amina Okafor. She had left school at 17 after her father's stroke and had been supporting two younger siblings through event work and housekeeping jobs. One afternoon, 6 months after the wedding collapse, Amina was invited to the Adeyemi Foundation office for what she assumed was another witness statement. Instead, Regina met her in a quiet conference room overlooking the city. "You spoke while afraid," Regina said. Amina lowered her eyes. "I thought I might lose my job." "You might have." Amina nodded. Regina slid a folder across the table. Inside was a scholarship package: tuition, housing, a living stipend, administrative training. A pathway into foundation operations if she maintained her grades. Amina's hands shook as she looked up. "Why me?" Regina's answer came without performance. "Because truth from frightened people is rarer than obedience from comfortable ones." Amina covered her mouth and cried. But these tears were different. They had arrived before applause. Spring returned with a softer light. In the gardens of the Adeyemi residence, white lilies opened beside wet stone paths after a dawn rain. Amina, now neatly dressed and carrying foundation ledgers under one arm, walked beside Regina near the reflecting pool, while staff prepared school supply shipments for rural communities. Across the lawn, Malik was helping a logistics team load boxes of textbooks into a transport truck. He was sweating lightly. His sleeves were rolled. No cameras were present. Nobody important was there to praise him. Amina glanced in his direction. "After everything they did," she asked quietly, "why did you still leave room for him to return?" Regina watched her son lift another box. "Because punishment reveals what was wrong," she said. "Mercy reveals what may still be saved." Amina nodded slowly. Beyond the far gate, more vehicles arrived carrying solar equipment for village clinics funded through the Foundation's expansion program. Malik moved toward them without being asked. The city still whispered about Vanessa Dube, the woman who reached for an empire by humiliating someone she thought had no value. But another story had become stronger. The story of a matriarch who entered her enemy's house dressed as a cleaner and left it carrying the truth in full view of everyone who had mistaken silence for weakness. And if there is any lesson in what happened at Dube Manor, it is this: luxury can be rented, influence can be imitated, beauty can be rehearsed, but character always speaks most clearly in the moments when a person believes no powerful witness is watching. So tell me in the comments, if you were Regina Adeyemi, would you have forgiven Malik so quickly? Or would you have punished him even harder? And if you enjoy powerful stories of betrayal, justice, and unforgettable reversals, subscribe now and turn on notifications, because the next story might be even more shocking than this one.